Council meeting. We'll first open up with a call to order with a Pledge of Allegiance, and will be led today by Acting Deputy Mayor Eric Covey.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure if you got stuck at least here. Okay, first up today is agenda review. This is an opportunity for council to weigh in on any items that are on tonight's agenda and their order, if there's any concerns about items on the agenda or their order. Any questions or concerns from council in regards to agenda? Okay, stacked up for attendees. Okay, so seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to public comment. Public comment's an opportunity for members of the public to address the council about anything that's not on tonight's agenda. You'll find an agenda in the back if you're curious as to what's on tonight's agenda. We would ask if you're here to speak about something that is on the agenda, that you hold off until we get there. But this is an opportunity, if there was something that someone wanted to speak to the council about that's not on tonight's agenda, to bring that item up. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Tipson.
I am here representing Season's Greetings, a group that has been doing, one of our biggest events has been the Festival of Pumpkins. This is our 16th year in doing it, and collectively as a group we've decided that this is going to be our last year of doing the Festival of Pumpkins. We're hoping that either the city or some side arm of the city or some group in the city will take over. It certainly is a very popular event, enjoyed by thousands perhaps.
Yeah.
And we certainly will be willing to do whatever we can to move it forward with another group. But I wanted city council to know first before I will let the city know and other people, but I thought it only right since we came before the council. You probably don't remember, but 16 years ago, we first approached the council to allow us to do what was then Smith Park. We have started this year's festivities. We did do the roundabout over the weekend, and the new outlets that the city put in are being put to good use. We appreciate them. We have more lights in the park now than we ever have, which really looks, my opinion, of course, looks good. And while I'm mentioning it, pumpkin carving this year will be on the 20th and 21st. We are moving the Festival of Pumpkins to a Friday and Saturday to more coincide with what's going on downtown. So it'll be the 26th and 27th, rather, Friday and Saturday nights.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, we're not going to let you go without saying, obviously, Sally, that there's no concept, I think, anybody that doesn't sit in your shoes that understands how much time and investment you put into it specifically, but everybody at Season's Greetings over the course of not just a week or two that they see the activity, but the entire year, and how much effort and energy you've put into that for over a decade to make that possible. And it is one of those visual cornerstones that people think of. We were just at a conference today speaking about vibrancy in Winooski, and talk about something that really denotes and marks an alive community. That event has meant so much to the community and city, and has been a rallying point for Halloween for a long time. And now you're seeing Halloween become an even bigger thing, but it really started with that. I mean, from my perspective anyway, I'm sure somebody could point to something further back than that, but can't say enough in terms of gratitude and appreciation for all you have done through the years for that, Sally.
Yeah, just to make it clear, it's not just me.
I know,
The
but
group, Season's Greetings, I mean, we're on the 3rd generation of the Maynard family, and
yeah.
that says something, and there have been a lot of very dedicated people. It's certainly not just me, it's people who have been with us since we started.
No, I didn't expect you to take a compliment.
I appreciate it.
And I saw somebody from downtown Winooski with a big smile on their face, so who knows, maybe there's a partner there.
We would be honored to take over, but I don't know if I can fill your shoes, Sally.
Oh, well.
Sounds like there's a negotiation to take place.
Yes.
Great. And so folks, then the 20th and 21st, you said, for the for
Pumpkin
carving?
carving, yes.
Great. And picking pumpkins coming up soon too?
Hopefully the 14th,
Okay, great.
favorite day of the year, next to Christmas
Absolutely.
birthday.
Thanks for all you do. Looking forward to it again this year. Any other items for public comment? Opportunity for folks to address council on something that's not on tonight's agenda? Okay. So seeing and hearing none, we'll move to consent agenda. We have 3 items on tonight's consent agenda. We have the city council liquor control minutes from September 17th, 2018. Also the warrants for payroll for the 9th of September and 22nd of September 2018. The warrant ending on 9/28/2018 and the subsequent payout for August. And we also have the Headworks Phase 2 final design loan agreement that was discussed in more detail in the previous meeting. Any questions or concerns in regards to consent agenda by council? Any questions or concerns from the public? So seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Eric, second by Hal. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. City update.
Great, thank you. So quite a few updates and heads up tonight. So just to start, Winooski's had, I think, a really wonderful week, 7 days. It's been a real pleasure and source of pride for me to be the manager in a week that we've had so much recognition across the state for the things happening here. So just to tick those off quickly, I'm hopeful that most of you have seen these, but obviously today I counted 12 people at the Making It Happen Vermont Council on Rural Development Conference about how you build communities within Vermont cities and towns. We had a great panel. Councillor Colston gave tear-jerky keynote speech at lunch. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And we did a panel that I'm sure others will talk about as well. There was also a team of young leaders there from Winooski High School that was really lovely to see as well. So really great day. Last Wednesday we hosted, as part of a Chittenden County Capital for a Day event with the governor and his cabinet, 4 different events here in Winooski to showcase what we're working on in our partnership with state and federal funders. We hosted a team from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, Agency of Natural Resources, and Department of Environmental Conservation, as well as USDA, focusing on our Main Street Revitalization Project and the funding we've received for that to date. The governor and his staff visited the Winooski School District. We had an Opportunity Zone briefing meeting with about 25 people in attendance, interested parties, developers, state officials, people looking to figure out how to use that tax opportunity for investment in Winooski. And then Twin Craft also hosted a session with the governor's cabinet as well. So it was great. And then last Friday we had the official groundbreaking of 268 East Allen, which is a true mixed income development at 268 East Allen with Summit Properties and the Jess Company and VHFA as a funder and COTS as a partner as well. So really great week in Winooski. Thank you all. And thank you especially, I want to call out Paul Sarn and Janet and Carol, who did a huge amount of behind the scenes work to make Capital for a Day work. Just kind of saying this is what we want, and all of a sudden turn around and there's this great setup. So thank you to the 3 of you for making it happen. A couple of city updates. As I hope you saw in his public record now, we jointly filed the litigation stay with UMB Bank last Friday. This is a temporary stay under a negotiated agreement on the lawsuit about Spinner and parking as we work through next steps to come to hopefully a litigation settlement by the end of November. Burlington Airport held their first stakeholders meeting as part of their master plan process last week as well. There'll be 2 more similar meetings throughout the process, and they have committed to publicizing those, really focused on what does the next 20 or 30 years of the airport look like, and how do we articulate a vision that then can be implemented over a couple of years. I did talk about governance. They also had lots of conversations about community outreach, some logistical changes they could make at the actual facility, and the ridership they anticipate over the next 20 or 30 years. Our police department last week held a training with all of the liquor license holders in the city around, it's called Place the Last Drink, that they're doing in conjunction with the state partners. Chief, correct me if I get this wrong. Really focused on how the professionals in our city who serve alcohol prevent negative situations for people in the bar. So specifically around training for preventing date rape and other assault things. So thank you for Chief Hebert for taking the lead on that, and our state partners as well. And then we have two project teams working with our middle school, with two different middle school teams right now. So with the Journey team, Ray and I are working with them. It's 3 classrooms of 6th and 7th graders on what the future of the Lot 2 park and what that could look like. And then Paul and Heather and I are working with the Nexus team on a storytelling project that is using our branding and as kind of a inaugural kickoff to the legacy campaign about the stories they tell about what Winooski is to them and who they are to Winooski, which is very exciting. About halfway through. Good? Good. So a couple of upcoming housing events we just want to call your attention to. So as we've previously talked about, the housing policy panel discussion will be next Tuesday, October 9th, here in this room from 6 to 8. This is a special meeting of the Housing Commission, and the public is invited to attend. Mike Monty, Erhard, Brian Pine, Eric Hoekstra will all be here giving us guidance on housing policies, the specific tools we're looking at, what they can achieve, what challenges are, and some things we should be thinking about as we look at those policy options. So again, that's next Tuesday night here from 6 to 8. It is here, right? CCRPC is also hosting the next convening of the Housing Committee members throughout Chittenden County. They have held a series of these conversations over the last year or so. This one will be on Monday, October 29th, and will specifically focus on housing trust funds and how those are functioning in all of our communities and how we can best leverage them. And then last thing on the housing front is VHFA and other housing partners are hosting this statewide housing conference on November 13th and 14th in Burlington. You can go to the VHFA website for more information on that. This year they're specifically focusing on municipal tools, so if anyone's interested, please let me know. We have a training, we can use municipal training budget money for that, absolutely, if people are interested in attending. And then for the fun stuff, we have a bunch of fun events coming up. This Wednesday night will be our last Winooski Wednesday of the season. We featuring Tender Bellies here in the Rotary. Come out, enjoy the nice fall air. This Friday, downtown Winooski is hosting their Winooski Art Walk. So a great opportunity to come out, take some self-guided tours, visit with neighbors, and support our businesses. Sorry, Kelsey, I'm calling out all your fun stuff. The Best Pooch in the Noosk Informal Dog Show, the 2nd annual, correct?
Yep.
Is this Sunday at 11 o'clock as part of the farmers market. It's a great event. And then a save the date, you heard from Sally about pumpkin carving earlier, but October 27th will be the official kind of Halloween in Winooski with events hosted by the Community Services Department, as well as the Haunted Mill, Pumpkins in the Rotary, etc. And that will be, our portion of that will be held at the VSAC Community Room as it was last year. So those are the events for your calendars at this point. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, next up is council reports.
No report. I don't have anything either.
Eric's going to come up and do a more formal update on where things are at with the master plan update, so we'll hold off on planning commission for now. From the housing commission side, the housing commission did review draft language for a replacement ordinance and started working through some of the more detailed items on that in consultation with Regina Mahoney from CCRPC with her assistance and support as well. Some of the major items discussed was the number of units impacted and the area that would be covered by it. I'm sure it was a long, very detailed discussion on it, but put it succinctly, there's going to, I think, real movement and really positive progress on that policy proposal. In addition to that, too, just reaffirming that they're working through a couple questions on the housing trust fund side too, and that's kind of going to be the next big thing coming up in addition to those conversations that are going to support their next discussions on inclusionary zoning as well. So Christine attended that as well, so if you have any reflections, by all means. And then I just want to take a second and note that in our next meeting, we will also be finding an opportunity for council in the city to tip its cap to somebody who served the community for 50 plus years in Clem Bissonette, with Clem's decision to step down from the legislator. He's leaving behind a massive legacy of service to the city of Winooski. And certainly the city was kind of waiting for everything. We got the letter today that's the official stepping down letter from the legislator, so we'll be taking actions to ensure that Clem has a great send-off to the next stage in his life. But Clem, if you're watching at home, surely the city would not be where it is without all of your efforts, time, and dedication to this community, and decades of sometimes thankless service that required a lot of time, investment, and distraction away from your personal life, professional life, and everything to make the community a better place to live. So kudos to Clem for all of his time and service on behalf of the community, and we'll look forward to finding ways to acknowledge that further. So if you see Clem on the street, make sure to give him a hug, high five, or handshake.
Yeah, so I also attended the Housing Commission meeting. Just some small things to add. The discussion around the replacement ordinance also included like monitoring and accountability, which I think is important to, this is something that they have looked at, as well as a discussion about trying to work from the framework of incentives versus barriers when it comes to development. And then as Seth said, the Housing Trust Fund was the next priority. It sounded to me like they might be reviewing draft ordinance at the next meeting potentially, so progress there. And then I also had a meeting again with Jesse and Seth, and this time also Paul Sarin, to talk about the communications ideas. I think we landed on some, like, what are the best next steps to take versus like just a list of ideas. And so it should be bringing something tangible from that forth soon.
Great, thank you. Okay. Next up, we have a public hearing scheduled that was a 6:05 start time. So we'll initiate and open that public hearing. The public hearing is for discussion and potential approval of consideration for repeal of section 6.14 of municipal ordinances, which relates to aggressive begging and panhandling.
So we talked about this briefly at your last meeting. There was an interest in repealing section 6.14 of our municipal code in its entirety. We heard from Chief Hebert to say that this would not negatively affect how they do business, and there was interest in moving forward with the repeal. So your work today is to hold a public hearing, and after that public hearing you can decide to move it forward to approval or consider other changes.
Great. I think this was discussed in questions, concerns in regards to this item? No. Okay. And do we need somebody to introduce in the public hearing? Do we need a counselor to sponsor or introduce the hearing, or does the full body vote on it?
Since it was, how I interpret it is since you had a discussion about it at the last meeting, it was introduced in the public hearing date set for today. So I think you've already done that.
Great.
So really today you need to open the public hearing, hear testimony, and then decide the course of action from there. Great.
So with no questions from council, just to summarize for the public, the discussion that took place last time, this is essentially, this is a rule that globally has inspired some legal contestation from the outside, and there were questions about whether or not it was really an operational benefit to have this ordinance on the book or not, and how useful it was versus the potential, quite frankly, whether or not it was, number one, negatively impacting people's ability to go about their lives in a free and untethered manner. And number two, whether or not it was frankly worth the potential legal headache in addition to that, and whether or not there was enough cause to keep the rule on the book. And what we heard back was essentially operationally removing it doesn't really change anything in terms of how the city does business and what it's like from an experience standpoint for our residents. So at this point in time, we'll open the public hearing to any public testimony, and that's just comment from the public. So if anyone has a question, concern, thought on this issue, now would be the time. Any questions or concerns from the public? Okay, so take it easy on people who are visiting the pumpkins, though, just because this rules off of the, okay, any other questions or concerns from the council? No. Good, so seeing and hearing none, I entertain a motion for approval of the repeal of section 6.14, aggressive begging panhandling ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Hal, second by Christine. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for your work on that, Chief. Thank you for your work on that, Chief.
And just for the record, per our charter, the repeal goes into effect in 30 days.
Awesome. Hey, I know this is out of order, but just want to say too, they did a great job with the street closure and bouncy house party on Saturday. That was great. Good job. Next up is Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, or CCRPC, annual report.
Some of these key issues and core issues. So since those plans have been done, we're taking the approach to this master plan update at a more macro level and trying to align the state's, the statutory planning elements. There's 12 required elements from statute and the 14 planning goals, and align them with the city's strategic vision statement. So aligning those areas with the economic vitality, the municipal infrastructure, the housing, and the safe, healthy, connected people, so that we can streamline the master plan update to more closely align with what the city's vision is. So it's taking a little bit of work, but we are fitting each of the required sections into that framework. Really what that's going to allow us to do is then more specifically be able to react to different topics that come up, or to kind of shift the direction that we need to go from a master plan perspective without having to do an update if the goals don't align, because we're referencing all those other planning studies and specific studies. So the work on this update started back in July. Really specifically in July, we contracted with the CCRPC through a municipal planning grant to provide some support on that. And it really does go without saying that without the CCRPC's help, and specifically Regina down there, this wouldn't be happening right now. We've worked through a preliminary and a secondary draft of each of the sections so far. So we are making good progress, I think. We're expected to have a complete draft probably around the end of this month for the initial review, and then completing the review of that draft in mid-November sometime for the Planning Commission to hold their required public hearing. Right now it's scheduled for early December, which then puts it on track to come before you all in January potentially. So the current master plan is set to expire in April of 2019. So that's our deadline for getting all this work done, which the schedule we have outlined should put us squarely on target to meet that deadline. So yeah, so you should expect a draft for your review sometime in January, and with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
I would say too, I would highly recommend when you're up one evening soon, right, hanging out with nothing to do, pop in and take a peek at some of those chapters and getting a little bit of the flavor for that. The link's been provided here for you to be able to do so. I mean, I think there's a lot of common threads and themes that we've all heard and seen in working around these issues that are being expressed, but we do have a lot of conversations going on in the community and the city. So certainly as that group's working through things, we try to stay consistent with all those other conversations. There will surely, when we get to the end of it, be some threads to tie together and tweak around, but Eric, Regina, I think I've done a really great job of building off all those other the work that's been done previously and sort of the tenor of where the vision is right now. So, but I highly encourage folks to poke in. They're not long to read. It's very accessible too. Something that's been really impressive with the writing is I think it's going to be something that provides enough structure without being too directive. And they've done a good job of staying out of operational weeds and operational, this is what we're going to do exactly, versus it being this aspirational, that they talk about, aspirational document.
Yeah, one of the pieces that we're working on now is the implementation program, which is really going to try to tie together all the specific tasks that we hope to accomplish, or the direction we hope to take over the next 8 years or 6 years as we work through this plan before we need to update it again. So that's going to be kind of the key area to bring everything together. Just kind of to the mayor's point, in my previous career with the Regional Planning Commission in Montpelier, working with our municipalities, most of the plans that I looked at would range anywhere from 150 to 250 pages long. We've got this draft document down to about 60 pages right now. So that I think speaks to the point of trying to make this a very accessible, very easy to read document that's not going to get into too much of the specific information and really reference those other studies that really do get into the level of detail that might be needed.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is going to be to come behind this and look at some of these other plans, the spoken hub model of it, and really when those need to be updated and when those issues need to be readdressed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 2014, even, it sounds weird to say, is getting further and further away every day, right? So it's
right.
Anything that needs to be updated over time and re-envisioned, although that's a bad example because we just spent a lot of time re-envisioning the Main Street corridor, but you know, the city just quite frankly let a lot of stuff get really out of date. And didn't invest a lot in its plan other than to get funding for the downtown. So that's why we're where we're at.
I should also mention the link that's included for the master plan should include a crosswalk of how the state's goals and elements align with what we're proposing, or what we've set up for this master plan, so you can see the various parts and pieces and where they fit into the overall document as well.
Questions or concerns from council? Comments?
I'm curious, to the statement that you made actually about updating those other assessments, I guess? Is that part of the master plan, that like we will readdress these issues in X amount of time?
So I don't know if we're explicitly saying that, but that's the idea, that the master plan, because there are specific statutory requirements for how and when you can update a master plan and the process that it takes, we're trying to leave the detail, the specific project detail to these other studies so that they can be updated. They can be updated when it really seems appropriate and when it's timely for those updates to occur, and not have to focus on this I don't want to say cumbersome, but this cumbersome statutory process. They can be a little bit more nimble with how they get updated and reacted to. So we're writing the I guess that's a long way of saying we're writing this master plan with the expectation that those plans and other documents will get updated at some point during the span of this master plan.
Thanks.
And I think just the other larger question is, I know in the materials we do have a plan to do public outreach and public sessions when the drafts are ready.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. We had a table at the farmers market I think it was last Sunday, on the 23rd, to get some public outreach and input, just to let people know. We're also planning to have a table at the Halloween event as well. So we'll be there doing outreach to the community at that event also. And then we still have some other items that have identified for other outreach activities as we get something that's more substantive to present to the community.
So Perhaps just to state the obvious here, I think one of my mind's full of this conference we went to today, and one of the things we heard from a lot of communities is what makes hard conversations possible in communities, what makes communities vibrant, what makes communities successful is a shared story, a shared vision of who they are. And I think that because we have that articulated, the Planning Commission is reviewing that language of the strategic vision and, checking in on that. This was a document put together in 2015. Are these still our community values? Is there adjustments that need to be made? But the strategic advantage of having that set of goal statements so ingrained in the work we do already and continuing on in this master plan, perhaps with modernization or further detail, I think is a huge community advantage and something that other communities, quite honestly, struggle to articulate. And so I think while nothing's ever perfect, it's pretty close to who we are and who we want to be, and aligning the master plan to that is going to be a real strength of this plan. And it's continuing those public conversations that have been happening in the commissions and in community dinners and in other visioning processes.
Questions for Eric or Jesse? No. Any questions, comments, concerns from the public? Good. So seeing, hearing none, I appreciate you doing a much better job in 10 minutes than I have done in 30 or 40 minutes of rambling over the last couple of months of giving updates on that. So thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate all your work. Are you having fun at Winooski?
Absolutely.
Good. Eric's been with us now for 2 months?
3.
3? Wow.
He's awesome.
That's great. All right, next up is the marketing, branding, and website update.
I will turn this over to Heather and Paul, whose work this really is. I think you will need to get the power button.
Okay, in your packet, I gave you kind of a brief overview of where we've been so far with marketing, branding, and website development. This is one of the 2018-2019 policy priorities that were set at our meeting developing the strategies for this upcoming year. So it is a priority to implement the marketing plan. It's also a priority to implement a new website, which is part of the marketing plan. I'm happy to walk through the memo with you, just so the audience and people watching at home kind of have an idea of where we've been. We completed a marketing and branding plan in July of 2018. That's when we received the deliverables. The plan involves implementing the new branding, developing a new website, and establishing and launching the legacy campaign, which I'll talk about a little bit later. The branding initiative resulted in a revised city seal, a legacy logo, a brand position, and a brand story. These are all illustrated and explained in the slide presentation that Paul's going to give you, so I'm going to defer to him in that. Development of a new website is underway, and we last reported to you in June, just to let you know that we had selected Civic Plus to develop the new website. Since then, we've had 3 meetings with Civic Plus, and we are moving right along in the process of developing the new website. When we have a little bit more, we haven't yet done the design content meeting, so when we do a little bit of design, we'll come back to you so you can see how we're moving with that. Legacy campaign is a lead up to the Winooski Centennial in 2022. And what we're developing is a campaign structure that's kind of a StoryCorps structure that builds on a common shared narrative about Winooski. So it's about 100 years of welcoming strivers, it's about a tight-knit community of neighbors, and a culture of always trying to do better as a community. And this campaign will be a partnership between the city and a wide variety of stakeholding partners. We've initiated outreach to some of the key stakeholder partners. We have a lot more to get in touch with. It's our plan to have a steering committee ready and having their first meeting in about November. So over the course of the next month, we'll probably have that advisory committee together. So if any of you have suggestions for people that you feel should really be part of that, please feel free to email that to me directly as I'm building that and developing it. I've also included for you a timeline and next steps of what's coming up. If you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul so he can show you basically where we are with the website development, what the results of the branding study were, and how that will work with our website.
Thank you, Heather. Keep this pretty brief for you. Just go through each slide. Just a brief overview. So the two vendors we are working with right now. So for marketing and branding, our partner is Engage Strategies. That process is now completed. Mike Bento from Engage Strategies was an absolute pleasure to work with. He was really great. I think a lot of our community members really enjoyed his outreach. Again, the process was very well. Civic Plus is our website development partner. That process, as Heather alluded to, is ongoing. That's been really great. They have their own sort of workflow. We'll get into that whole process. That's been really good to sort of be a part of. It would normally be kind of chaotic, but they have a very structured process. So that's been very cool. So the combined rollout and implementation for both of those things is February 2019, which sounds a little farther away than it is. It's pretty close. So deliverables from Engage Strategy include, as shown here, revised city seal. So that's for our general, internal, and external use. You can see it's pretty close to what you're used to seeing. As a matter of fact, it's very similar in both shape and design. We wanted to keep pretty close to what people recognized as the seal of Winooski. So again, that's sort of your general, internal, and external use. You'll see it on the new website. You'll see it on all of your documents. The other piece of that is the marketing initiative legacy campaign logo. So you see the Winooski, it says 100 years there. So that whole package basically includes a dedicated logo and implementation recommendations. Just to sort of show you what that looks like operationally. So the sub and co-branding, these are examples of how the city will use that. Will be co and sub-branding with existing departments and programs. So, on internal press releases and other things that the city uses, you can see how the co-branding works for the police and fire departments. We wanted to maintain use of those seals that they've been using in the community for years now. Works really well. Some of the sub-branding as far as interdepartmental stuff goes, you can see it'll remain next to the seal. It'll say Community Services Department. None of that is Recreation and Parks, so on and so forth. Some of the other deliverables allowed us to begin work on stuff that we have long needed, which has been really great to put some of that stuff together, like a branding and style guide, a social media usage guide. That whole packet, which I'm currently finishing now, will include guidelines for use of the city seal and the legacy campaign logo when we're ready to roll that out. There's a special writing for multimedia section, which I'm super proud of. It's really great. And a social media guide. That's sort of your general ins and outs of rebranding, I think, for any organization. This is a snapshot of the legacy campaign. I think Heather pretty well rounded you out there. So that begins in February, coinciding with the new branding and the website launch. The trademark registration is in progress, so that's exciting for the revised seal, the legacy logo, and the brand position, which is Vermont's Opportunity City. If you remember back to Mike's presentation, he went over a good chunk of that, so I won't read you the brand position, but it's there for you, and it's in your packet. Again, the development of that is still in progress, so if you have any ideas or want to get involved in any kind of larger way, we are here for you. Deliverables from the website development process are kind of split up into two factions. So Civic Plus is the parent company. The products that they provide are Civic Engage, which is your basic website package, and then Civic Rec, which is your recreation management software. You can do facility rental stuff and program registration. It will effectively take over the current platform we have now, which is MyRec. So sample features in Civic Engage, which is your basic website package. You get a new and improved agenda and minutes center. That's going to look amazing. Really excited about that. searchable news and document archive, integrated online forms, improved department pages, professionally managed security and data protection. That's huge. The way that we sort of manage that right now is with our fingers crossed, I would say. We do have some securities in place, and of course working with SimQuest internally offers us a number of those services, but this is an all-inclusive package that I feel really good about. Obviously mobile-friendly layouts, that's something we don't benefit from right now, but we will. As you can see, there's a nice little sample image there. It's not going to look exactly like that, obviously, but we're excited about that. And then the easy-to-use facility rental and program registration platform. You know, you get those easy one-click registrations through that mobile platform, which is really great. Seth?
How about access to online payment options? I mean, I'm assuming you have to use a different widget for that anyway, right?
Yeah.
So but it easily integratable into the new site.
Yes.
Okay.
So there are a multitude of payment options. It's all really vendor based, and their platform is very modular in the way that they can work with either vendors we have or vendors that they suggest. But there will be that.
Great.
WinooskiVT.gov has been acquired, so mission accomplished there. And then just to give you a snapshot of the progress through website development, the way that, again, being in their system of management is another thing that certainly guided us to February. They have a really great program they use called Maven Link. I won't bore you with all of it, but it's been really cool to go through that process. So it's 6 stages. You can see them there. We've gone through the initiation stage. That's great. We are currently in the analyze/design and configure. There's overlapping stuff. We have monthly meetings and check-ins and emails, and there's a whole platform in which I work with their team. It's basically its own messaging platform, so just add those staff members, and it's been really cool to go through that. You can see we've been through website content review and some of the other configurations. Our design discovery meeting went really well. This is just kind of a snapshot of how they took our color palette from the marketing and branding initiative. We were able to integrate that into the new site, so it's all going to look really great and really concise. Questions?
So 2 quick things to underline that Paul just said that I think are important. The moving from winooskivt.org to winooskivt.gov is a professionalization and modernization approach. Most government agencies have that .gov code. I'm sure there's a word for that, what that ending is. And so our email addresses will also be changing to that as we change the website. They will continue to be migrated over from org for a year plus, so we'll have that continuity, but they will merge. And then just as a reminder, one of the advantages of going to Civic Plus is that they are an off-the-shelf municipal government website product. So they have systems in place that have been tested and proven with municipalities across the country, and regular updates that we have regular access to through our contract with them. So hopefully this process, while it's a big overhaul now, will be easily updated over the years of the contract.
Yeah, Civic Plus has been the industry leader in municipal websites for a number of years now, and they were the clear choice when we went through the RFP process. I've been really happy with the work that we've done with them. And to just piggyback one other thing off that, similarly, we've been working on the internal switch to the Outlook Exchange from the Google Suite. As we're doing that, there is a changeover from where all of the publicly worn meeting documents sort of are housed now, but that'll all be sort of seamless and behind the scenes, and each transition of that will be seamless.
Paul says it will be seamless because he is doing hours of work right now to ensure that it is seamless. And we continue to meet our open meeting law requirements even as we give up the G Suite's platform.
Great. Well, that certainly, I know, will benefit the public greatly, having easy access, not just to those, but to all the services and information options. So thank you all very much for your work on this too. I don't think it can be stressed how important this can be for a municipality and the way we outward face the people that we serve. So excited about it. And an idea when they might have a beta site?
I would say we'll probably get to a process similar to beta testing through November. How accessible that is to people other than myself and the team, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
But we'll have another update then for sure.
Yeah, I think I put in the calendar that would be coming back in November.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be an interesting process to see how they suggest we go through beta testing the website.
And we saw the legacy logo before. How many people have seen this new one on the right?
I would say this is the first unofficial unveiling. So.
But the steering committee has seen it.
Correct.
Yeah,
And
that's what I want to
some
point out.
key partners in that logo have seen,
Yes.
in the current logo have
Do you
seen
want to
it.
talk about the steering committee and how this was considered, if you could, please?
Yeah, we had partner stakeholders, and I don't recall the entire list, but some of the people we very specifically reached out to were the people who had helped to develop the previous logo. So we wanted to be sure that was developed in, I think, 2012. So we wanted to be sure that we weren't straying too far from a fairly recent planning process, and that we were holding on to the things that were most important to the community. So that group gave feedback all the way through the process, so both on the legacy campaign logo, but also on the revised city seal.
Great.
And that's part of the reason that we very much stuck with keeping the onions in there, because it was an important piece of it, and we had heard that repeatedly from people in the community. So we just basically refreshed it so that it goes along with the legacy campaign logo as well.
Still the Onion City underneath there.
Yep.
Questions, comments for Heather, Paul, Jesse on?
No.
This has been something you guys worked hard on for a year plus now and took a lot of public feedback on, got a lot of input on, so thank you very much for, I think, taking all that and transforming it into something that's going to operationally have a big impact, so it's awesome. Questions, concerns, comments from the public? Yes, Ron?
For the record, Ron Stortime, Chairman of Community Services Commission. Paul, I saw an element that identified the Community Services Department with the subtitle Recreation and Parks.
Sure.
My concern, probably relatively small, is that phrase is a bit limiting to the actual scope of the department. From my position as chair of the commission, I recognize that we have a much broader scope. And I wonder if there's some way to modify that subtitle a little bit to indicate the broader scope.
So if I could fit every single one of the sub-departments on here, I would have. But obviously there will be Community Services Department, and then there will be, the Winooski Memorial Library. So that'll take over that below heading, Recreation and Parks. The Senior Center will have their own. It's just an example of how will basically be sub-branding.
So this is specifically referring to the Recreation and Parks
Right.
Department. So that's the branding for the Recreation and Parks Department. So it's speaking to it falls.
Additional
Yes.
elements
Correct.
for the other
Correct.
areas. Okay.
If it was coming straight from Ray's desk and it just said Community Services Department, there wouldn't be an underpinning there.
Mhm. I was, particularly interested in knowing that there's going to be something to identify the library.
Absolutely.
And the senior center.
Of course.
The two important parts of our community.
Agreed.
So that's great. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So was it in 2012 that we got rid of the onion and we put scallions in there? I haven't been paying attention.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, there was a like marketing branding group, 5 or 6 people got together back then, and that's designed by a resident in town. She does the school newsletter and other things too, the current seal that's used most often.
So it's the scallions.
I believe it's Wild
Ramp.
Leaks.
Ramp.
Yes, they're actually wild leaks. They're not.
And now who's going to be using the website? Because right now, just you guys do the website, right?
No, it's publicly available. So this is going to replace the winooskivt.org. So the large public website where you go to find somebody's information that's going on the community calendar, the name of the department person you might want to contact if you've got an issue, if you wanted to learn when dog licenses are due, all that good stuff.
Okay, thanks.
You bet. Other questions, comments, concerns? Good. Thank you guys for doing this update. Appreciate it.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to hearing how things continue to progress.
We'll be back.
Thank you.
Heather, don't leave.
Oh, yeah, I'm not leaving.
Yeah. So next up is an annual tradition resolution for Small Business Saturday.
Yeah, so the city of Winooski has been invited once again to participate in demonstrating our commitment to our small local businesses by establishing November 24th, 2018 as Small Business Saturday. Small Business Saturday draws national attention to the important role that small businesses play in boosting our economy, creating jobs, and maintaining our neighborhood character. And we've been participating in this for years, and generally the downtown organization partners with us and basically sets up shop and hands out swag bags and really encourages people to visit our local businesses. So, and this is for the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So after Black Friday, Small Business Saturday.
It's great, and they recognize Winooski on their site too. And like I said, they give a lot of branded material that help promote local businesses. So that's great, and our businesses have responded really positively to this in the past. I'll do a reading of it and see first if there's any questions or concerns from council. Any questions or concerns from the public? I want to acknowledge downtown Winooski and all your work, Kelsey, and your organization's work to support the business community, and thanks for your help and support for this as well.
Happy to do it.
As the holidays approach, it's a good thing to bring up. So the resolution reads, whereas the governor of Winooski, Vermont celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community, according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are currently 30.2 million small businesses in the United States. They represent 99.7% of all businesses with employees in the United States and are responsible for 65.9% of the net new jobs created from 2000 to 2017, whereas small businesses employ 47.5% of the employees in the private sector in the United States, and 90% of consumers in the United States say Small Business Saturday has a positive impact on their community. And whereas 89% of consumers who are aware of Small Business Saturday say the day encourages them to shop small all year long, and whereas 73% of consumers who reportedly shop small and independently owned retailers and restaurants at Small Business Saturday did so with their friends and family, and whereas the most reported reason for consumers aware of the day to shop and dine at small independently owned Saturday was to support their community, 64%. And whereas Winooski, Vermont supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And whereas advocacy groups as well as the public and private sector organizations across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Therefore, I, Seth Leonard, Mayor of Winooski, Vermont, do hereby proclaim November the 24th, 2018 as Small Business Saturday, and urge the residents of our community and the communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. I can do so by proclamation only with the support of the City Council. So with that, I entertain a motion in regards to the resolution establishing November the 24th, 2018 as Small Business Saturday.
So moved.
Motion by Hal, second by Eric. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for your work. Kelsey, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
All right, item E, discussion approval Myers Pool Engineering Services Agreement.
So I'm gonna have John come up. This is really this is the next step in the Myers Pool project, and just want to acknowledge that this is really kind of the transition point of this project from solely a community, or not solely, but a community services driven project to a capital project, therefore sitting with DPW and our city engineers. So John's now taking the lead, but very much with Ray and community services as kind of the client representing the community's needs.
So this is for the next phase of design and basically all the way through construction for the Myers Pool renovation project. So it covers 5 main tasks, design development work, which we'll get to sort of final design document, construction documents that will be used for bidding, permitting task for all the permits required for the structure and pool, and then of course going out to bid, and then construction administrative services. And that covers all the way through to the end of construction. So the total price, total lump sum cost for engineering services is $305,000. And then we do anticipate there will be a $3,000 to $5,000 administrative cost for the bond anticipation note.
Just to say a little more about that, so to move forward with this project now, the team has come to the position that we really do need to do a bond anticipation note. The earliest we could bond for this would be with the winter bond issuance in January, which means that next month we would have to be setting the total amount of what to bond. So are we going to raise the $300,000 challenge you've given to the fundraising committee? You're going to hear a grant application following this. Are we going to get that? If we wait until July for the summer bond issuance, we'll have some answers to those questions. If we can bond less, our debt costs lower over time. So to do a bond anticipation note will allow us to have funds to cover this work that we need to do now, between now and July, while still being reimbursable by the bond. So if you remember the bond resolution you signed, it was a bond and reimbursement resolution, so it allows us to pay ourselves back for costs we incur before we issue the bond.
And if, obviously, if something happens, the bond's not done, then
we pay
we have a $300,000 bill. We'll have a,
Yes.
okay, we'll have a payable that needs to be addressed. Okay.
So the reason we're bringing this forward now is in our past conversations back, I think the first meeting in September, and thinking about how to move forward, we heard that the intention of the council was to continue on this schedule to enable the pool to open as the public understood. In order to do that, we need to keep moving forward with engineering. So the risk we take, as the mayor just said, is that $300,000 cost for this. Now, if for whatever reason we decided not to go forward with construction, the construction element of this contract would go away. We wouldn't have incurred those costs. So while we would have to pay the debt service on it for the life of the ban, we obviously wouldn't have to pay for the construction cost of this contract.
That's what I was just trying to ask is, the staged payouts and whether or not, I mean, I see those 1.0, 2.0, but
So we would, so for example, if we went through 2 construction documents and then that was it, we would not be required to pay the permitting, bidding, those last 3 tasks if we weren't going to go to bond and construction.
and it seemed like that. They just kept using the word lump sum, which was interesting to me, instead of staged progress payments.
Yeah, it's sort of lump sum per task, I guess you could say.
Okay. But are they gonna ask, to me it looked like it's payable up front and then they're gonna do the work. Am I wrong about that, or is it tasked upon completion? Cause work will be billed to the performance shall not exceed with a prior approval, but then it's got, again, this lump. When I hear lump sum, it usually means upfront lump sum, period, the end, right? Am I reading that incorrectly?
So the way, just because I've sat on the other side of the table as an engineer, typically what you would see from the proposal is you'd get a bill for, okay, you're 10% or 25% through design development.
Right.
So you'd get monthly payments based on their progress, and they would be up to that lump sum amount, say $62,000.
Okay.
Can I say it just a different way? So the difference is the lump sum means this is what we're going to pay for, as opposed to a time and materials contract. Often you'll see if it's not written like this, it's written as we think this is gonna take 100 hours, but you're gonna pay for it on time and materials. So if it takes 120 hours, you're gonna pay for 120. If it takes 80 hours, you're gonna pay for 80. The lump sum just means this is the amount you're gonna pay for that phase.
Okay, and I guess just in the course of this too, I think for this body to know how those expenditures are going at a pace, so that they can also use that as a benchmark to help them understand when decisions and final triggers really need to be pulled, I think would be helpful. That sound right? Just so the decision's not made a week late that, you know, would have been $100,000 one way or the other.
So I think this is probably a question for us, is why we couldn't have the total amount by January. So Jesse was saying about anticipation note, because we won't know by January what the total amount is we want to bond for.
So to get a bond closing in January, we have to file the application in November. So we'd have to know in a month the total amount we were going to bond. And you're right, this is a question for you all. In theory, we can bond, we have authorization to bond the entire amount in January. I think my perception is that it's a hard community lift to go back to the fundraising committee and get a guaranteed dollar amount from them in the next month. And we won't know about this grant application you're about to hear next. So the question is, we could bond that full amount. With the information we know now, we'd essentially need to bond the full amount in December or in January, knowing in November what the number was. Or we can go through this process and know more definitively in May for the July bond issuance what that actual number will be, and therefore lower our debt service costs over time.
With a build too.
With
The build grant.
Yeah, that's on Main Street.
Yeah.
Oh, the impacts of the bill grant, yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But you're right, Christine, in theory, that is a policy question for you all of, do you want to go forward with the winter bond vote, in which case we likely wouldn't need to do this ban. The bond anticipation note.
Has the fundraising committee offered any feasibility figures? I mean, what might be possible, or what's the market?
The short answer there is no. Met with them, it was about a month ago, I guess now, and they're continuing to do kind of in-person asks, one-on-one asks, but they haven't, from a sophistication level, haven't gotten to that point, no.
Okay.
And I don't want to speak for them. I know they do have some funds committed or say that they do, but I feel like that's their story to tell at this point, and honestly don't know kind of where they're at. But I think it buys them some time, which is a positive to kind of take this approach. And like Jesse said, then we don't bond for money we don't end up needing.
So the impression that I had after we discussed this last time is that we had reached some consensus that that dollar amount I can't remember exactly what it was for those certain items like community room and slide and stuff, that those were contingent upon fundraising and we would not bond for that or put that as a city obligation. If that is something that we have consensus on, then I think we do have an idea of what the final number is. I don't know what the impact is if we get grant funding then to, if you do a large early payment, like with private loans?
You cannot prepay at the moment.
Yeah. Bondholders like their money on time, but not early.
I mean, in theory, we'd have to talk to the funder about this if we were to get that grant. In theory, we could put that money into account that we use to pay debt service over time and pay that down so we don't have to allocate other dollars to pay it.
But you would incur the additional interest.
You'd incur the additional, right.
Okay.
So, and am I correct? Are there other, I guess, liabilities with doing the ban, other than if for some reason the project were to not move forward, being on the hook for that amount of money? Like any timeline concerns, any financial impacts?
I mean, there is interest we pay on the short-term note. That's the $3,000 to $5,000 cost that we wouldn't otherwise incur.
It is also very short term, so it would be due and payable at the end of 1 year.
I would be inclined to absorb, I appreciate, and I don't think that you're incorrect. I think that to me, that we said we were gonna do that baseline amount, and that's what it was. I do think that given some of the other balls in the air, that if it's not an overly exorbitant administrative burden from a functional standpoint, that paying the $3,000 to $5,000 to keep that flexibility is worth it. Because there's still a lot of unknown balls in the air and those two projects merging together. And frankly, we've had one really in-depth conversation in regards to how the staged implementation of the project would look on Main Street in conjunction with the pool and that sort of larger global financial picture, and how we might stack that or stage that tax impact over multiple years. So I think it's a worthwhile cost, the $3,000 to $5,000. But I don't feel I agree with you. I want to make that clear from yes, that decision was already made. And I don't like throwing $3,000 to $5,000 away, but I'm concerned that if we make a commitment, there could be something that backfires in doing so, because we haven't. I don't know. It doesn't feel like we've wrapped up all, especially the tax staging conversation.
Yeah. Well, couldn't it be that the amount we would pay in interest if we were to bond for the $150,000 that we wouldn't need if the grant comes through would be significantly more than $3,000 to $5,000?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with the sentiments around the table.
I have a less related question. In this, in the memo here, it says, goal to have a construction budget that will be approximately 3.4 million. I don't have the budget details with me that we've seen them before, but I was under the impression that like this work here is part of that 3.4 million versus an additional 300,000 for like this pre-work. Am I mistaken?
Correct. So the engineering proposal was, I think, a percentage included in that overall. So it may just be, I think we'll have to talk to them about that budget number, but that's correct. So this engineering fee and the construction fee was included in the overall project cost in total.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're not looking at.
No, there's not an addition to, right?
Well, isn't this 3.4 plus the 300 gets you to 3.9? I mean, that math doesn't totally work out, but then there's other contingency there.
Did we?
Because we're at 3.
So the bond vote was for 3.9 million. So of that 3.9, what Weston and Sampson is now is saying is 3.4 of that 3.9 million is construction. This 300,000 is part of that delta, and then there's another. Is there another? I don't know where that 2 delta comes in. That 200,000 delta comes in.
Could be the VE options.
The value engineering options potentially.
The value engineer proposal was 3.582, and then the reduced, the really low one was 3.293, and then the original was 3.913. That sound correct?
Yeah.
So we were going with the 3.582, yeah. I don't have the big sheet from the last presentation. This is from the promotional material slide that we used, not last one, but.
Right.
But I think to Christine's point, then could we just walk through what the 3.4 in coordination with the potential 300,000 plus would be? If you approximate 3.4 based on strategic information, the goal data construction would be probably 3.4.
So you're talking about the full scope for the proposal. So when we spoke with Weston Sampson, the scope was the VE option, basically
Okay.
that VE option.
I think we're just trying to figure, is there, the 3.582 was value engineered, and then the additional 300 plus thousand was gonna come from the community fundraising, right? So the 3.4 to 5.82 is the $180,000, just did that get worked out? Or is that in some additional costs somewhere outside of this contract in relation to the pool?
I think we'll have to talk to Weston Sampson where that.
Where the different number, okay, yeah, well, it's less than the 3.5.
Right.
3.582. So if that's the case, it's not a bad thing. Is it? I'm sorry.
Right, if it includes this 300,000.
Mm-hmm.
But if it doesn't, then we're talking about 3.7 now.
Mm-hmm.
It also, I mean, it's listed in task number 1 to present potential value engineered options. And so then now I'm curious, is that not included in 3.4 already, or is it?
Mm-hmm. So one of the pieces in this proposal is the community fundraising. So it's going to be designed assuming community fundraising goals. And then once we get to, say, bid document phase, those items will either remain or get pulled out. So I think that's what's referred to as sort of VE options.
And also careful to say there's a goal for a construction budget. It's not saying what the construction budget is.
Yeah, until we get bids, that's
We're not
that's
gonna
when
know
we
that.
will know for sure.
Wish in one hand. Okay.
And this feels like the question I ask every time. If we don't bond until July, what is the impact on our, the opening schedule for the pool?
So there wouldn't, by starting engineering work now, there would not
Oh.
be an impact.
I mean, if we don't do this and we wait until July to even start the engineering work.
If we wait until July, then I believe we would have a delay. That's a pretty significant, just loss in time in engineering. I don't know exactly
How it would impact the
how much
construction
it would
timeline.
slide. Yeah.
Well, I think we would not be starting construction next summer.
Yeah.
But
We
this,
probably won't be starting construction next summer anyway. We would be starting construction maybe the fall of 2020. So we would be opening the fall of 2021 or 2022. So we'd lose a summer season.
but to the point of why we chose to go this route, this is not work that ages out. This is work that once invested upon could be used for the project a year from now, 2 years from now. So I think the decision in fronting this cost, the reason we made that decision, the rationale and reasoning, part of it was we know this is gonna get done at some point, so we could go ahead and do this, try to keep with the ambitious timeline. If it doesn't work out that way because of other decisions this body makes, that's fine. But the general sense is eventually at some point we're gonna build a pool, whether it's starting in that July or the one after that, or I don't wanna get into that, but, right? This is a transferable, non-aging work. I mean, at some point it ages out, but. Other questions, comments, concerns? I think circling back with clarity on the numbers and that 3.4 and what that means in relation to those other things is a big takeaway on this.
So I am comfortable with you tabling this for tonight, and we can come back to you at the next meeting with specifics on those numbers if you would like.
Yeah, this tabling slow anything down?
It went, not for,
2 weeks.
yeah, no.
Okay. You can work out it sounds like there were a couple other term details that you guys were gonna poke at anyway.
Yeah, we just had some, not scope related, but general terms and conditions stuff.
And obviously staying with Weston and Sampson versus going out broader, they've done the previous work. Okay, and there's not like a ton of people in this field anyway, just. What else? Anything else to bring back on that?
I mean, I was looking at like the exclusions list. It mentions hazardous analysis and geotechnical testing. I believe those already happened with the previous, okay, I just wanted to confirm that. And then I note that it says, no changes to pool program, which involve adding, removing or altering size. Similarly for bathhouse building, changing footprint or layout. So we're not talking about changing the footprint or layout of the bathhouse, right? Like that's already part of this, yeah. And I would just say to your point about this being like, doesn't age out. If there was further discussion around like the pools themselves, this is just like really committed to what the exact thing that we see right now, but with only those things that we've already talked about, value engineering, potentially out.
So is your concern that other items?
I just want us to make that clear, that like what we're saying, like this is a committal to what the proposal is as it is with only the value engineering that we have already discussed. Okay.
Yeah, it's the VE model, and that's what was just said. I think clarifying that dollar amount will be helpful.
Yeah, we can get that clarified.
Okay, that's it.
If you think of other questions too, since it's coming back too as you look through it, shoot them to Jesse and John. Questions, comments, concerns from the public?
Did we already vote on the poll?
You did.
And how much was it?
We took, yeah. So the full, I'll say ideal build out for the pool was $3.9 million. So council decided to put forward a bond proposal that would cover that entire amount. Concurrent with that conversation, we also had some value engineering done. Basically, we said, what would it take to rebuild a similar structure without the same type of components that were being proposed, namely a slide and some other things? We basically looked at those and said, okay, if we remove those items, we can get it back down to a little bit more of an affordable level. So we got down to 3.5 million instead of 3.9 million. There's been a group that's expressed interest in fundraising. So there's been a conversation back and forth, well, how much should we raise? So we said, we removed these kind of value engineered items. If you guys want to add those back in to get back closer to that $3.9 million, here's your fundraising goal, which was $368,000.
Ballpark, yeah.
Somewhere around there. So we turned back to them and said, here's your goal, good luck. And we're committing at this point in time to building the structure with the value engineered items removed. Like the large slide is the biggest item, help me out.
Community room was another big one, pool heaters was one, but I think just to be clear, as we're doing the design work and engineering work, it's easier to design the full thing and go back and peel stuff out at the end versus design the sort of shortcut version and then add those on after. So we're going to work with the engineer to do the full design, and then as we get closer to the funding decision, if the money's there, depending, we'll take things off the design accordingly, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just want to reconfirm, what I recall that we discussed last time was the value engineering version plus the fundraising items reduction. So it would have been less than 3.582, the total that we were talking about. So that could be where the 3.4 comes from. I don't know.
I believe the value engineering was more in like material selection, things along those lines.
Right, yeah, so that included like, you know, something about like, I just remember there were tiles in there that were fancy for no reason.
So the total, if I can jump in, the total original was 3.92-ish. That's what was bonded for, up to that amount. The value engineered version that, again, took off some of the surface treatments, the extra materials, like you said, the fancy tiles that maybe we didn't need, got us to about 3.6. I think it was that 3.58 number. We were, I think, for sake of easy math, saying 3.6. There's also another iteration where if you peel back the community room, the slide, and I think the heaters was the third big element, that gets you to a number of about 3.3. So that's where that $300,000, $368,000 fundraising goal came in. So I think to reflect back, I think this group said, yeah, 3.3 in that area is where the bonding level comfort is.
Yeah.
That additional $368,000 would need to come in as fundraising dollars to get those pieces kind of retained in the design.
So that's my fault. I looked at the wrong one and referenced the wrong numbers.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, this is exactly what I recall.
Okay. There you go.
So now I'm not going to restate that. What he said was correct. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, thank you guys. Appreciate it. All right, next up, Vermont Land Conservation Fund Grant Myers Pool Renovation Project.
So excited to bring this opportunity forward. Definitely wanted to discuss it here and kind of get council's take, but this is a federal pass-through opportunity that at this point cycles through every 2 years now with the state of Vermont through the Department of Parks, Forests, and Recreation. So interestingly, this is one of the major funding sources that funded the pool when it was originally built back in 1972. The city got a grant for just over $100,000 at that point. Unfortunately, at the time, that covered most of the cost of the project. Times have changed, so that is not the case now. But we are hopeful that we can go for up to $150,000 within the grant pool this year. It's looking through the last sort of 40 years of grant awards. They range everywhere from $10,000 to, I think the high water mark was $260,000. So it's really all over the board. Realistically, the number of projects funded in that 40-year span that exceed $100,000 is pretty scant. More of them end in the sort of $80,000, $90,000, $70,000 range. So I think 150 is an ambitious ask, but I think it's worth going for. But just to be clear, that's an up to amount. So they may well come back with partial funding or recommend that, because again, they try to spread that funding around the state. From a process perspective, there's a pre-application due on October 15th. So that's largely what we're here tonight to seek permission to go ahead and submit. That triggers a site visit with the staff from the state that manages the grant. They'll come on site, kind of walk through the facility, make sure there's no whammies there for us. And then at that point would invite a full application. Those are due December 17th. One other piece, and we talked about this grant a couple years ago in relation to the dog park, but just important to note, the Land and Water Conservation Fund funds come with a requirement that the land that is funded is retained as recreational facility in perpetuity. For us, because that's already the case, given that this was funded by that funding source 40 years ago, it's not an additional requirement on the property, but just so that that's out there and clear. When we talked about the dog park, ultimately we decided not to go for that grant because for the money we would have gotten, that's a big commitment for a long time. So again, though, just important to call that out.
Great and good luck. Hope it goes well.
Right.
And if this body needs to do something to support this being a but-for funding stream, if you know what I mean, please let us know if that puts additional.
Yeah, I will keep you posted.
That additional clarity is needed for the body that makes that funding decision, because they like to be but-for money.
Yes.
Other questions, concerns, comments from council?
I have a technical question. I can't remember exactly where it's at, but there's some some requirement in here that all of the property is supposed to be outdoor recreation related. And I wondered if having a community room on there fits within that use, or if that is a conflict, actually.
It's a good question. So this has definitely funded a number of swimming pools over the last 40 years. Unfortunately, the list just has sort of the project title, so it doesn't get into the nitty gritty about did it fund the slide or the bathhouse or whatever. I would say I don't think that that's going to be an issue. I can certainly check through the pre-application process. And again, that's where those kind of details get teased out. The pre-application is a one-pager. It's just a paragraph summary of the project and a funding request. And then when they come on site, that's really where you can hash out those details. So I will definitely make sure to ask that question. But it's a good point. I think, especially Seth, with the but-for piece, that's one of the pieces that would be, I think, potentially a but-for if this grant doesn't come through. That may or may not happen. So I can definitely ask for some clarity there.
Thanks.
Yep, good question.
Certainly a high leveraging of municipal investment taking place, so hopefully that helps us score. Other questions, comments, concerns? Any questions, concerns, comments from the public? Yes, Ron.
I'll just make a brief comment that it's probably important to go after grants like this wherever possible. It will help to satisfy the community public that the council is trying as best possible to reduce the overall impact on taxes.
Sure.
So I think it's a good thing to try for these grants.
Thank you. And it's just it's a tough field. There's not a lot of federal dollars available for swimming pools. It's just not something that has the same amount of funding available as other recreation stuff. So it's a tougher field, but thanks for finding them and pursuing them.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments, concerns from the public? Okay. So seeing and hearing none, I would entertain a motion for approval of the submission of the Vermont Land and Water Conservation Fund grant for the Myers Pool Renovation Projects.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Eric, second by Christine. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next up is FY20 budget goals.
So, at your last meeting, you approved the schedule of the FY20 budget process. Angela's been hard at work starting to build out the basics of the FY20 budget, and tomorrow the department heads get their individual budgets and start working on them. Before that happens, we wanted to come to you and see if you would be willing to set some FY20 budget goals. And our key questions, and this is in the memo outlined for you to consider tonight, are what is the council's tax rate goal for FY20? What are your priority areas to fund? Given that we may need to identify cuts to reach your tax rate goals, what are your priority areas for service reductions? And are there any new initiatives or programs that you'd like us to consider as we build the budget? Related to these questions is our recommendation that the operations budget be built outside of consideration of any tax rate increases we might be seeing as a result of the capital projects, as we've talked about through those bond votes. In preparation for this discussion, we put together some data for you about what our current municipal tax rate is and how it's increased over the last couple of years, as well as what tax rate impacts mean. So just a reminder, in FY19, which we're currently in, a 1% increase in the tax rate equals one penny and 1.07 of a penny, so almost a penny. It's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. In the equivalent to that in general fund dollars is $50,300 of non-TIF related general fund growth. This year, $1 million of additional grand list growth. So if we see a new project go up in the city that's valued at $1 million, assessed at $1 million, that equals $10,700 into the grand list. So you see how those two things equate. So just to throw out some initial FY20 assumptions we are making. So several of our contracts as well as our practices have staff getting COLA increases annually. COLA is running, as you may know, because unemployment is very low, and a variety of other economic factors, COLA is running quite high right now. So we are anticipating a 2.8% increase being built into the budget, which has a value of about $132,000 for the FY20 budget. So that's not great news. That's almost 3.5% increase unto itself. Better news is that we got very good news about our health insurance increases. Our projections right now are showing only a 2.5% increase, which if you've tracked health insurance increases over the last couple of years, we've been seeing 8% increases, 12% increases, 9% increases. So 2.5 is great news and calculates to only $13,000 increased based on our current enrollment in benefits. We anticipate moving forward with our non-union wage adjustment plan. We are seeing workers' compensation increases across the state, driven by claims, also by changes in firefighter workers' compensation rate philosophy changes. We are contemplating, as you heard talk at the last meeting about the Spinner lawsuit, about the reduced WCDC payment to ourselves, which we implemented for FY19 and are living within for FY19. So we anticipate coming back with a similar recommendation for FY20. We also contemplate coming back with a continued commitment to the community outreach team, which was an ad last year or this current year that we're in and is proving very successful. There are a couple of other FY20 budget ads that we perceive a need for. Those are around the Chittenden County Public Safety Authority, which our community voted to enter into on town meeting day. So there are two ads as we consider potential implementation of that in FY20. One is the capital and operational investment we need to make to stand up that new entity. And the other is any potential local staffing changes we will need to see, given that we will no longer have dispatchers sitting here 24/7. We have also had conversations about expanding the rental registry to include the Winooski Housing Authority units. Currently, we don't inspect those, and as you know, Winooski Housing Authority is an amazing community partner, provides a lot of housing stock in our community, and we'd like to bring them into the rental registry fold. And then, as last year, we built a salary contingency into the budget and anticipate doing that again this year. Below, in the next three sections of your memo, we've bulleted out other areas for potential funding that we've heard in conversations over the last year, or other conversations we're having internally, and I'm happy to tick through those or let you read them. And then other items we want you to keep in mind as you think about FY20 are, moving forward on town meeting day with a conversation about local options tax or multiple, just one. As you know, for FY19, we brought the O'Brien Community Center into the general fund, the continuation of that with the leases we've put into place or will be putting into place. And then the potential of a parking garage bond vote for the TIF district.
With the idea that hopefully is a net neutral impact to our tax base.
It will absolutely be net neutral to the tax rate. It will still be a public bond vote that we will have to consider as part of the town meeting day ballot. So I think it's important to call out as part of this conversation. But you're right, no tax rate impact.
Just don't want people thinking, wait, we're building a garage too with tax dollars. So lots more to come on that. Do you want to quickly talk through any of the ads? Things
sure.
that we maybe haven't seen or?
Yep. So we have a section here called FY20 budget ads for consideration. So these are things either we've heard from you or we've been thinking about. So we've had a lot of conversations as a team about affordable housing and standing up an affordable housing trust fund. Often municipalities will allocate dollars to trust funds as either seed money or to demonstrate a community commitment. So that's what is meant there. We have some concerns as a staff team about taking on Main Street, pool, a parking garage, general CIP improvements, and our capacity, especially if we are going to leverage significant state and federal dollars and have to do grant reporting, with our capacity to do that between Public Works and Finance. We also sadly are losing our very part-time accounting clerk. And so there might be some, to make that a more a position we're better able to retain, may make some sense to expand that role to do some of this grant monitoring if we're running, you know, multi-million-dollar CIP projects all at the same time. Our camera system and server system citywide is very dated. It needs replacement. We anticipate that downtown Winooski will be coming in with an additional funding request. We have had a conversation between staff team and council about engagement and breaking down barriers to participation in the council and commissions. So we were brainstorming ideas of how we do that and if there are financial implications. For example, we've talked about realigning the commission meeting structure to be the same night and providing dinner and childcare, and that would come with a budget add. Other communities I've worked in have purchased technology for the council. Right now you all are using technology, but it is your own technology, so that may be perceived as a barrier to entry for somebody who wanted to serve in a council role. And of course we're having a conversation about increased training for the commission and council. The fire department is having a conversation with the state, as well as going through training for themselves about plans review. So right now we contract, or the state provides building plans review after projects are locally permitted for zoning regulations. So then once we finish, it gets transferred over to the state. There are communities that do that internally with their own folks, and as we continue to develop and continue our professionalization, that is something we may want to think about pulling back into the city. The fire chief is looking at an assistance to firefighters grant, which is similar to a COPS grant, where you can get funding to support fire staffing. As you know, we continue to make work, but struggle with the reality that we are not a full-time fire department and have folks who are solely on call to us responding. There are difficult hours of the day to cover, specifically the work day when most of our firefighters are off in other communities responding, and is there a way we could build some capacity to provide that coverage? We are looking at a shift in our HRA FSA benefit, which would have a $1,200 cost. It would be solely for the purposes of improved customer service to our employees. The superintendent of schools and I and Christine and Seth have been having a conversation about communication and how we best leverage the school newsletter, which goes into every mailbox in the city, to communicate about what we're doing. In talking with the superintendent about that, that certainly is a very important tool in our community to get the message out about what's happening. And if we're going to be using it as a city newsletter in conjunction with a school newsletter, could we contribute some amount to making that happen every month? Currently, we do not. And then we currently budget about $2,000 a year for tree service and maintenance. We're actually spending more than that. And we have seen this year with John's leadership a number of pretty problem trees that have resulted in emergency treatment needed, as opposed to kind of regular maintenance that may have prevented that. So really believing that our urban canopy is important and needing to budget some money for that. So those are our current considerations for ads.
Okay. Because Angela's here.
Angela, you want to come up?
No, just.
I would like Angela to come up.
Can you remind me where we sit on current fund balance, just for a total picture?
360,000.
So remaining unassigned from FY17 is 368,000. I've not yet finalized FY18's numbers, but it's looking at an additional 150 right now.
Okay. So just to point out to folks, the reason I'm asking that question is there's a number of these are operational items, and we've taken a stance the last couple of years anyway, to not use one-time money to pad the budget, and that's generally the smart, wise practice to take. But I do want to put that number in there from a context standpoint, because I do think that we're going to probably end up having to have a conversation about how that could play into lowering long-term debt service on some of these large capital projects. Due to those amounts, and that's something I think is, we can't have that conversation obviously on the fly, but I think what would be interesting is to hear back. I mean, the hard part is that's what addresses things when they come up and opportunities. So I think it would be good for us to have that conversation about what a reasonable structured amount might be, from your perspective, Jesse, in terms of keeping something back potentially.
So those amounts do not count the council's policy for fund balance.
Mm-hmm.
So that 30 days cash on hand is not included in those. So you do still have some free cash available for some operational opportunity.
Yeah, it's more of, the fire station roof goes out, right? And we need $40,000 on the fly to take care of that.
Right. I think it's the shift in thinking that we've done in the last couple of years from you allocate out the fund balance to it becomes the savings account for the things that emerge. A massive roof leak, for example, or a grant match. Often grants will come with match requirements that we don't actively budget because they're not purely operational, they're one-time costs. So leaving ourselves some ability to be nimble with that savings account, I think is valuable beyond just the cash on hand, ensuring that we have enough to make payroll for a couple of months, etc.
Right. I think it might be interesting to throw back into that conversation to potentially, if that reduction somehow gives us some operational revenue breathing room by reducing debt service on long-term debt. I could never do it. I could never spend that money on operational costs in good conscience. I think that's just fiscally wrong on an annual basis. I could see potentially investing some of it towards a capital project that then reduces the city's long-term debt service obligation. But I don't want to have that conversation without you guys having time to really think through, okay, if you're going to do that or think about doing that, we would recommend at least leaving this behind out of those dollars. So it's not, totally leaving the cupboards bare. But if we're at, those two numbers combined, $500,000, there may be some flexibility. Sorry.
That's nimble, and I appreciate that.
I believe, just looking back in the other document before tonight's meeting, we were guesstimating when we had the initial tax conversation around 4%, right? Was kind of the stated goal going into the conversation about what operationally would be necessary to maintain and sustain operations for this year. And that seems pretty reflective of this document too. Okay. I will share with you guys, Nicole did submit formal written statements on 2 items tonight, the last 2 items on the agenda that she did want shared. And in FY 2020 budget, Nicole gets to speak first. She said, I believe we need to limit growth of tax rate to Main Street and pool projects cost plus the lowest amount necessary to cover increases in salary benefits. I do not think we're in a position to expand programs or services at this time unless we can propose potential cuts to a program we're shifting around. And then I think she's got another offline item to talk about with you about specific program outcomes. I'll have her connect on. It's not really relevant to the meeting.
Sorry, Seth, can you just read that one more time? Got blanked out there for a minute.
Well, she basically was saying the project cost, so the new debt service on Main Street and pool, plus salary and benefits. And was just saying, didn't see room for programming
great.
unless there was shifting of programming, like
Yep.
we're gonna cease doing this and start doing this.
I was unclear about the capital and the salary and benefits, so that's helpful, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else like to share some reflections about this? In the past, we haven't given to staff a hard cap to work with going into the budget season. Last year it was our first foray into that kind of general conversation, and we were kind of like 1% to 2% ish going into it. But I think guidance this year is a lot more important and needed and necessary, in fairness, because we've got the debt service that's also going to be hitting the tax rate at the same time.
I would be curious to hear at a high level how, like in 16, 17, and 18, we were able to float around 1% increase, which I believe is like below COLA every single year alone.
The only one here for those budgets. Okay. So the way we've done budgeting in the city for quite some time is that we've asked for a net zero impact budget. The net zero impact budget, it was basically we said to staff, do everything that you're doing to the best of your ability, keep that intact in the budget while proposing a budget that's a net zero impact to the taxpayers. So what we then did was we created a list of items that were, this is what we had to remove to get to that budget. And we would decide, are we going to restore any of those items? And then staff would bring back, the things we discussed previously about what might be added to the budget. So there were a number of things over those years that were cut out, cut down. I'll say that, we really took a scalpel and got down to the bone when it comes to padding the budget by and large. So that it really, we took things down lower and lower and lower. So, and there were a number of things that were just eliminated over time, that were just cut out. So that's how we ended up getting there. The discussion has always been we're bleeding a rock at this point, though. That now there's no more padding to cut out, and so that when there's just natural inflation or increases in things, there's nothing else to slice. There's nothing else to get out. We can't lower, the $10,000 that's actually only used, in office supplies that we're only actually using $2,000 of. That line item doesn't exist with that level of variance anymore. And that's why when we review things like the fund balance, where it comes from, the fund balance right now is almost solely from staffing, right? It's almost solely from...
It's usually staffing vacancies or use of health insurance less than anticipated.
And for folks to understand at home, when we say fund balance, it's the amount we budgeted versus what we spent. And when we've got money left over at the end of the year, there's fund balance. If you've got a big fund balance of $700,000 at the end of the year and it's padding and budget, that's not good. We've gotten to the point where now really all of our stuff is not padding, it's operational. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I sit relatively in the same boat as Nicole, that if we are anticipating this pool on Main Street, these very large projects, that we are not in a position to add additional programming to the city. If we're looking at 4% just for these assumptions, and we've already floated another 4% for Main Street, and I think the pool's like 6%, like that's too high, and that's a number I'm not comfortable with. Obviously, we have a lot more work to do with Main Street and the pool, but I wouldn't want to put us in a position where we're already talking about like 6% just for operational costs. That really doesn't leave any room for that work that voters have already said they want us to move forward with.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I'm looking at the ads needed, I wonder about that. Like you're talking about the unassigned funding for one-time costs, if that's applicable to the initial investment for the transition for public safety. So maybe that would not be a factor here. I wonder about inspection on the Winooski Housing Authority units. Is that something that they're not already doing themselves?
No, that's,
Or are these just, I'm wondering what is the need there, or if it's something that could be held off on.
there was a lack of understanding on parties' behalves that they do fall under the jurisdiction of the city's inspection program. They get inspected by other entities, and their assumption has long been that satisfied their fire requirements. It actually does not. So I let their board know that was an issue last month and flagged that for them. So.
And I think the point, this is a laundry list of things that we're gonna hear much more detail on. The point of including that in this list is likely that would not be a tax rate impact. Likely the fees we would newly charge to WHA would cover that increased operations. Having said that, it is quite a significant add in our community. So I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that without you all knowing that was our intention for service delivery and kind of blessing that new service delivery. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would say that, like, even with these assumptions, even with just the 4% for operation costs, doesn't leave us in a good position.
Yeah, well, it's gonna cost more to run the city every year than it did
Right.
last year. So that's reality. So you've got one or two choices. You either do that, or you tell people what to cut. And that's what it is. Other concerns, thoughts, comments, questions for Jesse? Yeah, I guess just to try to kick off, some more is, I think the message has to be, we just don't have a lot of room this year. We're just not, from a debt capacity standpoint, gonna be in a position to be, as reactive and open to new requests as we have in the past. And that anything or one seeking funding from the city should be aware of that and think of creative solutions. And that's, I look at the downtown Winooski request, sidewalk fee hasn't changed in how long, and that's again, we're talking about 1% increase. We want to be mindful of what we're passing on to our business owners, but that's maybe an alternative methodology of addressing that issue. But
We pay all the sidewalk fees to the WCP, so I'm sure they'd appreciate that, but.
No, that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. That might be an alternative to address
For that particular one, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the position I don't want to be in is to see service or program cuts, and because of these bond items that we've decided to move forward with. And I think I've been pretty consistent in saying that from my perspective as we went through those bond votes. So while I agree that there is not much or perhaps any room for growth, I don't want to see us start to roll back what I think staff already does an amazing job providing considerable amount to our community with the resources that we have. And I think that I would not feel comfortable restricting those resources.
Do we want to say instead of net zero level services is a more fair approach?
That's what I feel comfortable with.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah. How are we doing, city manager?
Not net zero, but level services. That is lovely.
And I think if there is something that you're feeling really passionate about that is somewhere on one of these lists from a staffing perspective, and there's room to shift around prioritization within that department, or whatever that might be, I'm still really open to that.
Yeah.
But I like the concept of level services.
And that's exactly what Nicole had placed in hers too, is if it's a adjustment of service provision to better meet the needs of the community, totally understandable. But in terms of creating growth and line item expenditures, that's a challenge without it coming from somewhere else.
Because I think there are, of course, still areas in need of growth in services we provide to residents, but there's just not the room for that this year, considering we have to be good stewards of the public and the impact that this has on people's wallets.
Great. Thank you very much. The other thing I did not say out loud that I should have said in my intro is that this is also outside yet of the process of Eric and John Audie sitting down with our city assessor and coming up with some very based in reality assumptions about grand list growth, which obviously is the other half of this equation. So that's what you don't have in front of you yet. That work we'll do in the next couple of weeks. So if that changes significantly, then we've been averaging between a 0.5% increase and a 0.8% increase. If that changes significantly, we'll come back to you and say we have more. I don't believe it will, but we'll certainly call that out if that becomes a reality. But this was very helpful. Thank you.
And the other thing that I would like just to turn back towards us, just to ensure that we don't let our hands off the hook, is that this council also we need to be swift and decisive in making decisions about revenue generating things and making very clear choices and decisions when it comes to things like property transfers that the city's holding on to, but whether or not we support something like the 1% tax or sales tax, which I think we've all expressed appreciation or support for as part of the funding package for Main Street. But
I think there are nuances there.
Yeah, I think though that we're going to have more of those decisions and opportunities to move forward with potential revenue sources, revenue generating, tax stabilizing projects in the future, and that we need to be really mindful of that as we move into those discussions, that we are dealing with a financial reality that to keep up with growth, just the growth in basic service provision, we better be prepared to be about 4% per year, which if you do the math on what you need from just a growth standpoint in your grand list, 10,000 per million, and if you're at 4% at $200,000, doesn't take too much math to say you need about $20 million in growth every year in your grand list to satisfy that need. So I just flag that as a backdrop to this conversation too, is being financially responsible is part of us making those decisions too. So box, sorry.
No, I think I was responding specifically to what you said about the local options sales tax and saying that we've all spoken in support. I think I've spoken in support of a form of a local options sales tax. For me, it was not the one that was included in the most recent projections.
Okay, you sure? Yeah. I'm sure there'll be discussion about that to come. Other questions, comments, concerns from council? I think that was helpful to the manager.
Thank you very much.
Questions, comments, concerns? Yes, Ron.
I speak as chair of the commission, Community Services Commission, but only for myself. At this point, I don't feel that I could speak on behalf of other commission members. Our last meeting, just last week, we had an opportunity to look at the schedule for the development process. And my personal opinion is that the commissions appear to be on the schedule rather late in the process. And my concern is that we will not be able to do a really thorough and informed to council. What I mean to say is that in the past couple of years, we've had a pretty good voice in recommendations and advising and so on and so forth, especially about ad drops. And now it appears that it will be difficult for the commissions to do that because we won't be party to many of the decisions that will already have been made. It seems to be the case, the way the schedule is laid out. And I would personally hope that the commissions will be enabled again this year to provide, a fairly considerable amount of input to the system and advising to council to help council make good decisions.
Absolutely, and the dream and vision of the commission system too is not just that it's a one-time comment on a budget, but that you're helping to develop the priorities and the strategic approach of the area that you cover.
Yeah, certainly.
All along the way, and which the budget is just a number that we use to try to support the vision work, right? That's being done in the strategic goals. So absolutely, it's in the process for a reason. I know we kind of have tweaked it each and every year as we've gone along. I don't think anybody thinks we found this perfect balance with interactions with the commission, the way the structure works, quite frankly. So I think, they try to be thoughtful in this year's schedule and trying maybe a little different, but by and large, we do still feel like there's a great opportunity and window there for that engagement. Other questions, comments, concerns? Okay. So seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to tonight's last item, which is charter process regarding all resident voting. So take a lead on this one. So following the vote in the last meeting, we're bringing back, as promised, next potential steps on the consideration for the community of moving towards a public vote on some timeline in regards to all resident voting. Put together a memo that structured, I guess, the way that the conversation appeared to go and what the key decision bottlenecks were that were before the council, in hopes that we could get some feedback tonight to keep this item rolling at a pace that's congruent with what your goals are as a body. Okay? So, starting off, first, I want to note that this is really the policy perspective, the policy creation perspective, and the timeline and important key pieces of this. I wrote this, right? Just taking from our conversation. What we did not do, really very intentionally, is go to staff and build out a combined policy or a schedule. And the thinking there was that the potential charter change process, the content, and then the outreach efforts, those things are going to feed into what the timeline should feasibly be, and should be done perhaps in consultation either with this body if we're going to continue to own the issue, or potentially by a committee that should vet that with staff closely and thoughtfully, and not have it be just a schedule or policy that's just implemented based off of a deadline. That there should be an exchange there where staff can say, hey, we need to do this, and this as part of that, and they can also overlay whatever goals we've given to them, if it's the committee or again if it's us, and we can come up with a more complete schedule. So I just want to flag that this is from a policy perspective either. So the main bins of decision criteria that I put out was potential charter change process options. And by process options, this goes back to the concept of whether there's a history in Winooski of opening up a charter committee, a committee that considered changes and then passed a recommendation back to council that then would get the yay or nay or adjustment from council. When we took up this issue, the decision was to keep it with council essentially, I would say, and really act ourselves as the charter committee in that case. So decision there. The second item is content direction and next steps. So we've got a couple options there. Continue to focus on all resident voting as a singular item being proposed in the charter change update, and clearly direct whether or not that includes consideration of voter checklist protections or any other items. And then option 2, open the charter to a broader review of other operational or political structure items. So this is should we keep this a focus issue only on all resident voting, or should we broaden it to open the entire charter up for review with any other operational items that might be on there? And then the next item was outreach efforts. And this was, I put together the 4 points, one for performing targeted outreach directly to impacted community members for feedback. And then also put in parentheticals, given the limitations we have in staff capacity right now, recommended parties that would take those items on. Schedule public information sessions and forums, and formally engage the school district for feedback, and formally engage basically political entities, the governor's office, VLCT, key legislators, and legislative committee members. And then finally, we've got timeline options and opportunities. And again, for scheduled proposals and work plan to be developed, the thinking here was if there's a committee path that this body decides to hand this off to, that at least starting them off with a target outline would be ideal. Usually when you establish a committee, you try to give them, hey, this is what we would like you to do and the timeline we would like you to do it in. And then they get an opportunity to say, hey, you gave us this list of stuff you want us to do. We think that's reasonable or not, or we think we can get it done then or not. And so that's what the timeline options were. So I think I was trying to get to the point of at least getting some instruction on this. In terms of next steps and phases, if there's feedback on especially the first item, which is the structure of it, I think we could move relatively expeditiously if it's the council's desire to either start preparing things to come back here for the council being the operational policy development body, or posting for a potential committee. So the document goes through a couple different options. I don't know if you guys want to just talk through each one and maybe start off with the charter change process options first. Make sense?
Yeah.
Last time I thought that I heard in rewatching it too that there might be more interest in a committee approach.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm also gonna. Okay. So it sounds like that's gonna be. And I'll try to bring up Nicole's. Okay, that was easy. That was also Nicole's expressed interest. Okay, so in terms of the composition of the committee, are we comfortable with the full proposal there in terms of what that might look like for composition, being the joint committee being offered participation to the school, and any other composition comments in regards to what it looks like? I had 2 counselors on there. 2 members of council, does that make sense?
I think, yeah, my question would be, I like the idea of including the school district. I think my question would just be figuring out what is our process for community members and how we're finding and appointing individuals who are interested in the committee.
So I thought that question might come up. What I would ask is, you know, historically, we've either we've done it in multiple ways. We've done targeted outreach and brought specific individuals in because we thought that they brought we recruited people on the committees because we thought that they brought a particular perspective or capability to a committee that was specialized. Sometimes we've done that through public postings, sometimes we haven't. Sometimes we've just said, we're just gonna elect a committee, these are the people that are gonna be on it, that's what it is. Other times we've opened it up to a public process that anybody can apply for the position, you know, but here are the qualifications, and then we're gonna make a decision based on qualifications. I think it's just important, if you're gonna go that route, that we be very defined about what that looks like, and what if any identifying factors could be used to help people understand if they're qualified or not, if that makes sense. So as to not set people up for disappointment if they're not selected for whatever reason. So, Jesse, from a capacity standpoint, creating an outlet for applications to be deposited from a commission standpoint, that's not a huge ask, is that right? From running that process of...
Yeah, we've got a good process. I mean, I would look to you all to set, what do you want that solicitation to look like? What do you want to say? What are those characteristics? We have a good process for taking in applications for those things. That's...
I think, and I'm open to hearing what others here have to say. I think because this issue is pretty focused, pretty specific, and I think based on what I heard at last meeting, we'd all be interested in including people in that process who would be most directly impacted by this. I think that a council appointment process might make the most sense. And I don't know if we are gonna put aside 2 council liaisons to serve on the commission. It might be a first good brainstorming activity for the 2 of them to put together some ideas and come back to the council.
That would be fine, and that would be something that that's exactly how we handled the city manager search committee, for example.
I like that.
Myself and somebody else went and we said we would like to have these people, brought them back to council, and said these are who we think should participate and this is why.
I sort of disagree. I agree with the step of having, you know, the 2 council representatives brainstorm on what it is that we're looking for. But I think given the sensitivity of the issue and the broad impact, it would be nice to open this up to anyone who wants to apply, with some clarity on, like, we're gonna have preference for, or I don't know if requirement's the right word, but somebody who is, you know, for example, if we want somebody who's got some representation for New Americans or something. But I don't want to see this committee contain 2 council representatives, 2 school district representatives, and 3 non-citizens. I would like there to be a citizen resident there to bring that point of view in.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we could say that.
That is the part where I think it's harder to appoint somebody to that role.
Here's a potential alternative. You could have it as a public posting, a public opportunity, then the 2 councilors review the applications. And if people have particular individuals they think are really qualified and would be really great candidates, you poke that person and say, hey, we'd really like to make sure you fill out an application for this.
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Does that work?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Are we comfortable with, I mean, I think we can use really almost this summary as the posting to explain to people like what's going on, what this committee will actually do.
I think too, I mean, interest, because the purpose of the committee is to move this forward, ensuring that there's a dedication to moving that work forward so that people aren't coming with an intent to join the committee and help work. And I don't know if there's a way to encapsulate that based on.
I hear what you're saying. I think council members something to the effect of, council members express a desire to consider how the city could move the issue forward, being a key piece there. Okay, I think I can work that out in terms of the posting.
Great.
We can figure out how to nuance that. Don't worry, that's not on you guys. That's okay. In terms of the school, prior to making that public posting, I think it would be good to offer it to the school, which has had no communication on this since our last meeting, haven't reached out in any way, shape, or form, didn't feel authorized really to do so. So would like to offer that to the school. Are there any thoughts about we can still pull those other individuals in that should, no clue how the school district will or won't, reply or not reply. So, I guess we'll just cross that bridge and see whether there's a reaction. I mean, I think they would obviously elect their own representatives to participate. Okay.
Yeah, that would be tough to coordinate, but I hear what you're saying.
And does the council have a commitment to moving forward with a committee as well, should the school district not participate?
Yeah.
I would want whoever the members of the committee are to then somehow try to include the school district into this targeted outreach area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I'm trying to ask all the questions to make sure that we can react in the next 2 weeks to whatever unfolds and not be stuck, not being able to move. Okay. All right. What else on process outline?
I guess I have a clarifying question, based on previous charter committees, what's the commitment in terms of time? So we can give people.
Well, that's going to be determined by number 2. Yeah. Well, no, just the content, because if you open up the entire charter,
right.
We met last time. We met once or twice a week for a while, because it was fast unfolding. I mean, we spent about $12,000 or $14,000 in legal fees on that, didn't we? Yeah, I think it was $12,000 or $14,000 in legal fees. I bring that up because it gives you an idea of how much back and forth there is with saying, hey, this is what the committee is trying to achieve, passing that to the attorney and say, can you please put this into charter, and opening up the entire charter and having it reviewed is a thing. With that being said, I think that there have been some items identified that from an operational basis you could narrow that scope and say we're not going to do the whole thing. We're going to address some of those operational items that I think have been identified over the last couple of years. I don't know if you want to say anything about any of those in terms of what's popped up in your minds in the past.
Yeah. So I have a list of things I would like to change operationally in the charter. I think it is very much incumbent on you all to define the parameters of this. If this is really for the purposes of a public process around all resident voting, then that is a very different process than having a community conversation about governance and who we are and how our city operates. Just to say a little more about what Seth was just saying, the charter commissions I've worked on before, it is an intense process because between the commissions, the staff, and the legal counsel, you go through a process of saying what's your value as a community, what are you trying to achieve in governance. Then the consultant often goes back and looks at how do other charters achieve what you're trying to accomplish, feeds those options back, and then narrows down to what's the language in the chart. So it's kind of a three-step iterative practice going from community values to best practice to language of your charter. That's a very different process than what you all have been talking about. The things I specifically have identified just about what city operations would like to see. This isn't about what the community may want to see from a values perspective, or, you know, you've heard me say I'd like to take the word citizen out of the charter. I think it's a misnomer of how we're doing business. Our charter refers to our volunteer fire department, which we don't have. We have a paid on-call department, and as we try and modernize and professionalize that department, I think language clarity helps. Our charter also, and similarly in a professionalization vein, our charter calls out that the manager is the personnel director. The manager will always have hiring and firing authority, so that doesn't necessitate the need to hold that title with the manager. I think the manager should be able to delegate out that title, still holding the hiring and firing power. I think that would, again, build up our staff. Those are very operational, in the weeds, wonky things. Those may not be the thing, you know, if you think about, I think the way the mayor outlined this about process, next step, outreach, timeline is a good way to think about it. If you're committed to moving quickly to March, there may not be time to do that full process. If you want to have a real open, broad community conversation about who we are and how we govern ourselves, then that should drive what, you know, those other questions.
And I think that is a very, that's a very staff time intensive thing to open up the entire charter. Just, it is. So I just flagged that. But then there's this philosophical question of should you change anything in the charter without doing the whole, you know, looking at the whole thing. And that's why we try to walk it in this direction versus saying, what's your timeline first? Some people will prioritize any of these things as the most important part about what we're doing, right? Some people will say, well, this timeline of getting it to March is the most important thing to me. Checking all these outreach boxes are the most important thing to me. And some people will think, well, I think it's most important that the process and content is the most, is done right. And then we back into what the timeline and outreach looks like. Understood there's going to be varying opinions on that. So yeah, I do think that the next question would be, you know, whether or not if there's a desire, and I will say we are hindered in, I don't know that should complete understanding that by not having Nicole here today, you know, and that's whether the council takes into account or not, but if there's interest in who would comprise the council delegation to the committee, because I think, you know, if you want to move this at, you know, the quickest possible speed, you could potentially open up the posting and try to have recommendations for a committee by the next time. You could also take the 2 weeks, have, you know, have the posting go out, give people a chance to file those applications, choose the composition of the committee at the next, or the council liaisons, and potentially have word back from the school district as well by the next meeting, which would help inform the rest of the composition of the committee, I would assume. I just want to make really clear that means that we might not have a full functioning committee though for a month, because I know where I'm sitting is if we're delegating that authority to 2 other people to look through those applications, this council's going to appoint the body, and I'm not interested in having 2 people just make those. They're there to vet the applications and make the recommendations back to council.
Well, this is a month where we have 3 council meetings, right? There's one on the 29th.
This month?
October, is there not?
No.
So we never do that.
I will say that if we needed to, we could pull a special meeting in response to the need. I think it would need to be very limited and very, you know, quick to that effect. So these are the time things that I've had trouble, wrapping up perfectly. Here is that, because that's,
Given that there is a lot of community interest, if we're able to get a posting up, it could be possible that the hiccup is if we're waiting until the next meeting to appoint the council liaisons. So I guess, depends on what we're all comfortable with appointing council liaisons. If we have council liaisons tonight, then I think we could probably have those council liaisons come back with some recommendations to the council the next meeting. If there aren't enough applicants or that work is not fully done, then it can be moved back a meeting too. We could kind of see where we're at. But I guess that first question's got to be answered first.
Are there counselors who are interested in participating on the committee?
I don't think it'll be any surprise that I am.
I would certainly join Eric if that's the will of council.
It's fine with me.
You're not rushing. You're not rushing to volunteer.
Did Nicole in her written testimony for the record say anything?
Didn't express it, and I will say that unfortunately we did not get a chance to connect today because I was going to try to make that point clear that could come up tonight to see if there was any interest. Because this has been such a big issue, I do feel slightly conflicted on that she's not here to be part of that selection process. Not because I have any particular inclination that she would or wouldn't want to be part of the body, but she did, express interest in the committee.
Well, I do. Yeah, I mean, we do have. I know we all have lives too, but we do have these council meetings at a certain time, and we've got to make decisions if we're here. So I definitely hear you, but one of the things that I do think is important from my perspective is that on the council and our last vote on moving this forward, there was some fracturing from the council. And so I think it would be really important to include people who had more reservations with moving it forward from the November timeline so that we can have representation on the committee. So I think, I'm fine if Hal is really interested in this. I'm fine stepping back so that a counselor from
I'd do the same.
the other perspective could be willing to join, because I think that would just be a lot healthier as we're making this decision collectively and as we're working on the committee.
How about this? They who do not come get volunteer.
Ooh.
I'm not being facetious. I would like to nominate Nicole if she has the capacity to do it.
I support that.
Do you have any issue
Eric
with
and
that?
Nicole.
I'm fine with that. I mean, if Nicole doesn't want to do it, let her back
If she's against it, we can pick somebody else next meeting.
If she declines the opportunity, I'll reach back out to everybody to see if we want to do an ad hoc, one person here, a phone meeting, or whatever we need to do to make sure that the selection takes place to keep this on track.
Okay.
Yeah.
The thing that I would ask, though, given that body's you're welcome to any documents I have, I would just ask that group take lead in writing the post for the positions. Just collaboratively.
Makes sense to me.
I'm happy to provide again anything that I've written that's helpful to take or steal from, but that's okay. We can do that. The one thing I will do is, tomorrow, I'll send something to Sean and Mike at the school district for that. Okay?
Okay. Are you moving on
Yes. Nicole and Hal.
from this agenda item, or are you?
No?
No.
Okay.
We just did
One?
number
Okay.
number one. Okay, so next up is content direction for next steps. So we have option one, which is continue to focus on all resident, or number two, open the charter for a broader review.
So I think that, as Jesse also expressed, that those are two different conversations, this non-voting issue and then operations in general. And also that if we are kind of choosing a body around an issue,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense to also have them reviewing something operational that they don't have the background for.
I would agree. Yep. So am I, Nicole reflected interest in option one.
I am also interested in option one.
Moving on.
The next piece, though, is this consideration of voter checklist protection. Do we want that item tackled?
I think so. Who knows if they will come out with a clear yes or no, but I think it's worth having the commission look into if it's a possibility.
Other thoughts, comments, concerns?
I mean, the way that I've been thinking about this is kind of as a continuation of questions we have already raised. And that is an item that is
Right.
included there.
So can we agree that those are the two limiting things at this juncture? That if there are any other items that arise during the review, that we would like that body to bring those back to council before chasing them down the road too far? Okay. So those are the two limiting items of authority for the group. It is all resident voting only, and the voter checklist protections. Any other items will be brought back to council for clearance before spending significant time and investment of energy and legal funds on this, on that item. Jesse, anything you want to add there? I just don't want to skip if you had a comment on.
Does that include the citizen change that has been discussed, or no? Is that bring it back to you?
I do think that that was included in the list of things that was addressed. I mean, that was proposed in the proposal we saw, right? Is
Okay.
removal of citizen. So thank you. Yeah, I think that that's
Seems like a functionally very extensive conversation either.
yeah. What's missing in outreach efforts instead of us going through each one? And if completed, will these satisfy the council in terms of efforts and energy to engage the community? Nicole just said looks good.
I think this addresses the ones that we were concerned about in our previous discussion. And I think there's a lot of room in targeted outreach too.
I would say that I think an important thing for the committee to is to look at these and provide feedback to ensure that they feel like they've gotten
Guidance.
enough opportunities for that information, because ultimately the feedback's going to them before it's coming to us. Does that make sense? So that they get to weigh in on this, but that these are at least the prescribed soup to start. Okay.
So just skipping forward, without comment on the timeline that we have not gotten to yet, I just want to call out that I think this list of outreach efforts is great. Between now and the end of January, we will also be doing public outreach and public hearings on the budget, a bond vote for a garage, potentially the master plan, charter, and housing policy ordinances. That's a lot of community outreach. So we may want to think about how we tell that story to make some threads between those things, or I think the community's gonna get really tired. So just,
I also, from a capacity standpoint too, I think the benefit of having a committee is that it hopefully can take doing a lot of that outreach off of staff's hands in some ways.
I'm not saying it from a staff perspective, I'm saying it from a public, how much can the community take in at once perspective. I think there's a way to do it. I think it's just telling a comprehensive story rather than 5 individual public hearing processes.
Can you write those down for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so given, and we'll hear back maybe from the school district too in terms of feedback on our process and what this is. I'll just share this document with them and say, share your thoughts. They might have some input in terms of what they think is, or what makes sense in terms of their work, and whether or not they want to specified outreach to the school community specifically. Okay. So if the group's not starting until, if we're not selecting a group until next time, I think the potential timeline's less important. But does anyone want to make a comment in regards to?
I think, so first off, I understand we do need to give them guidance and timeline, but I don't want to be in a situation again where we have expressed support for a certain date and then we find ourselves not ready to move forward with that, and then we have a lot of folks feeling jilted about it. I would not be in support of committing to option 1 for the timeline. Also, given all the other things that are going on that Jesse just mentioned. And frankly, lean more towards option 4. I would like to give them a timeline of we would like to see where you are at this date with this information, or, can you get through this by this date? And then from there, with the expectation that if we have not resolved everything we need to, if we have not had all the public outreach we need to, that this could extend further.
I think one thing to think about in this that I was going to bring up to, especially the individuals who, Hal and Nicole, hopefully Nicole, for recruitment pieces, is the time commitment is very contingent upon this. So if somebody asks, what is the time commitment? If you were to say option 1 hard and fast and that's it, they better be ready to meet every other week and really rock and roll and expect those to be full meetings. And in addition to that, make sure that the outreach piece is conducted.
So I feel I'm in support of option 1. I do think there's a lot of time. I think when we were first discussing whether or not to move forward with November, with the decision being that it was too soon to move forward with a November timeline, I think that putting it off past March of 2019 is an even bigger pill to swallow. And I also think extending it out past that runs the risk of the work kind of languishing, but B also runs the risk of the committee potentially scattering, in that, if you have a dedicated group of volunteers, from my past as an organizer and volunteer manager, the one thing you don't want to do is not continue to push them or give them opportunities to engage. So I could see, if it continues on for a long time, people falling off, and then we've got to go back and revive the committee. And so I just worry about that process. I think there's ample time, but also in a way, right now this is something that a lot of community members even are really in tune to and engaged with. We all heard from people from differing perspectives on the issue. And I think for then this to just disappear off the map for a longer period of time past March and then pop back up would also be kind of jolting for the community.
I follow that reasoning. I think using that date as a timeline for work is okay, as long as we are very clearly communicating that we have not committed to putting this on the town meeting day ballot.
Yeah.
That we are investigating the option to do so, but this is not a commitment to do that.
Yeah, well, I think that's with our, similar to the last time we discussed it, that we can say this is our goal. We would like for this to be on the March ballot, but obviously there are a number of process steps that need to occur in order for that to happen. Like, that could be the goal, but just like last time, if we don't garner the votes on council to actually move something forward, then it can't happen.
Nicole expressed written interest in number 4. My perspective would be to convey to them that we are open to having it on the March ballot, have them look at the schedule and give us feedback. My thinking was that they would give us feedback as to whether that was feasible or not, based off of their first, maybe second meeting. I do think that the reality is that that's going to be, that could be mid-November before you get that response back.
Yeah, I think it could be valuable for the committee to really come up with a work plan, what's really feasible and see where it lands. But, just to get the wisdom of the other committee members to weigh in. So.
And ask the question, for example, if they want to know, well, what's the implication of it being a special vote versus, those are the questions I could see. I would want to ask, how much does it cost to hold a special vote?
Right.
Like, what other votes are occurring next year that we could potentially piggyback on if that was the case? I don't think there are any. Yeah, and then I think to hear the political implications of going past March. And watching, I haven't paid attention to what Montpelier's doing, but knowing that. I think the biggest thing though is we can bring this issue back again next time because there's no pressure on that decision right now. Sound okay?
Yeah, and to the point about getting feedback from committee members is being able to share with them, these are the items that we want you to investigate. This is the timeline to do so because of public hearing scheduling, so that that's clear. Right? So we're not saying we want you to have all of this ready by March, it's actually before that. And then, whatever if this means like meeting weekly or so that that's clear to them.
I'm open with tabling the timeline discussion as we move forward these other pieces.
Okay. Great.
Really quick, can I just, so that we don't get hung up, for a timeline, does it make sense now that I'm thinking about it in the council liaisons to say if there are people willing to serve as backup for each of the 2 council liaisons, if people have to decline? That way we can just have that in the hopper and we can appoint as backup in the case of declination.
Sure.
I'd be happy to be one.
I have deep concerns about my time availability to do this.
Yep. I can be back up. I need one more meeting. So Hal and Nicole are the A team.
Oh,
Eric and I are the B team.
great.
Could I also recommend, actually now that we're thinking about this, that we also elect a alternate resident?
Good call.
So we're talking about a body with a composition of 7. I recommend that we do 4 residents and specify one of those individuals specifically as an alternate. Make sense?
Yep.
So 4.
Good catch.
Okay.
So just so I'm clear what we're helping to move forward with Hal and Nicole being point on, is sometime this week put out the posting for the commission members. For the next council meeting, bring back, sorry for the bureaucratic talk, the charter for the charter commission. I think we should do a traditional charter for that commission. If it's gonna be a publicly appointed charter, it's gonna follow open meeting laws, all of that. And potentially appointments. Yes?
Yes, and if we
So-
could just, if it's not too much trouble, you know, sometimes those are live streamed. I'm looking for Paul, but he's usually the point person on those coming in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if they could just be shared with them, you know, periodically throughout the process. I don't know. Well, you know what? You guys can work that out.
Do we want to establish a charter committee for the charter committee's charter? I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek, but
No, but yeah, no, the charter piece is
Boilerplate.
to spell out that it's a public entity.
Yeah.
I think my intent, though, I know you're kidding,
I
but
totally-
would be to share the charter
Yeah.
with Hal and Nicole to
Yeah.
make sure it's capturing
Right.
what you guys intend before
Right.
it goes.
Right.
And so is it the intent, just so I know how to support you all, is it the intent to actually interview candidates? And if so, we should really block off some time, like next, if we can get the posting out tomorrow for applications due on Tuesday, to schedule interviews on Thursday of next week, to get appointment names by Friday for the agenda,
I guess that's up to the
or
liaisons.
you, okay.
Yeah, I would
So-
do that. I mean, to be really blunt, I didn't involve staff in like the city manager. I just had people send me the applications and I followed up with, you know, I sat with the applications with the other person selected. We went through them and said, who do we want to contact
Yep.
for a follow-up? And didn't make it a, you know,
Right.
didn't take it any further than that.
Okay.
I think the important piece, you know, when it comes to public recognition of the fact, is to say, too, and note that, you know, this is the process that we're all adhering to. I can guarantee with 1,000% certainty that there will be somebody who will submit an application who will not get selected, who will be upset about that, and will have preferred that there be some additional public process of the selection of the committee. So I just want to bring that to council's attention. It happens each and every time we do that. At the end of the day, this body has to appoint sub-bodies
Sure,
to do things, and having an open application process and then a culling by 2 council members, you know, in the past has been a good way of doing it. You know, and if you guys decide you want to consult with, you know, somebody else, if it's just, you know, I get that, but I don't think you guys have to take ownership of like the scheduling of interviews or anything like that. That would be, I would think we would want to limit the impact to staff as much as possible on that.
Yep.
Anything else? What do we miss?
Who's calling Nicole?
I'll do that. We're gonna talk tomorrow morning anyway.
Smart man.
Maybe she's watching somewhere. Okay. Any public comments, questions, concerns? Okay. So seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain, that completes tonight's regular agenda. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Eric, second by Christine. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries.
It's not even 9.
Well, you know, there's actually a thing that